Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Now, years ago, I made a video about my initial discovery of sprite stacking, and as a way to test it, a project was created featuring a cat, or maybe a dog, and a weird arcade-style fishing concept. And secretly, at the time, I was hoping someone would see that idea and make it a reality better than I ever could. But it doesn't seem like anyone did, so I think I'm finally ready and able to do it myself. And before we go any further, remember to leave a like if you enjoyed today's video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Turn on notifications because you'll definitely want to keep up to date on this project, and you'll also be able to keep up with the many other game dev projects going on here on the channel. Now, there's a ton of ambition to this project, so be sure to stick around until the end. Now again, it's been years since we last worked on this, so we're starting from scratch. This also explains why for the time being we're using simple shapes for graphics. But don't worry, we'll get to them in due time. So let's take a look behind the scenes at the code surrounding this remake, starting with the boat that follows the player around. This boat is no longer an object, but a struct with object-like behaviors, including its own functions. Currently, the only functions it has relate to the adding, removing, and finding of loot stored in its inventory, which itself is an array. Now, as you can tell by our variables, we have 4 different pools. In order to hopefully help with the performance, our resources, bullets, fish, and bobs are all pooled objects. Each also have their pairings of push and pop functions to utilize said pools, and they could definitely use some optimization, but it felt like a good way to manage a large amount of content without ruining performance. Fingers crossed anyway. So on initiation, our player is spawned, the accompanying boat is created, and our pooled items are spawned and pushed to their array pools. Then, because a spawn system hasn't been added yet, 10 fish are randomly created near the player's spawn. Speaking of the player, movement for the cat or possibly dog protagonist is a little different from our usual fare. The player is only able to accelerate their boat forward and in the direction that it's facing, which is constantly pointing towards the mouse's position in relation to its own position. Moving is also applied via acceleration and friction, which, along with turn speed, will be able to be upgraded in the future. The player's explosive effect from the original, which is now referred to as a quote-unquote rumble, is also returning. This rumble feature uses a collision circle to check for any nearby fish, and any fish caught within the player's rumble radius will send it into a temporary quote-unquote pop state. In universe-wise, this rumble also takes its toll on the player's boat and temporarily stops it from moving. This idea isn't final, but yes, this cooldown and the rumble radius will also be able to be upgraded in the future. Finally, the player is able to use their weapon, which for now just simply fires a very basic projectile. As for those fishing bobs, well, they work a little differently from the original. Now, players will start with a certain amount of throwable bobs, meaning only a number of fish can be hooked at a time unless, you guessed it, that number is upgraded. Now, the bobs themselves have 2 states. The first is their initial thrown state, where they will travel a certain distance before eventually slowing their pace to a complete stop. If they collide with any fish before reaching the end of their state, that fish is placed in a state to be pulled in, and the bob is tagged with the ID of that fish, entering its second state. And regardless of any fish, this is the quote-unquote reel-in state, where they automatically return to the player at a fixed speed. Once the bob has reached the player via distance check, it is returned to the pool, and if a fish was hooked, that fish is also returned to its pool, with the player being rewarded a large number of resources for the capture, which for now is our only resource, fish guts. The fish themselves don't do much at the moment. For the sake of testing, they don't currently move, and a lot of their behavior is based on other interactivity with our scaly little friends. For example, if the player shoots a fish that's been rumbled, that fish is returned to the pool and a random amount of fish guts are spawned. This was done via a drop loot function that will eventually grow with time. In other words, shooting a fish will still get the player guts, but far less than they would had they just fished it in instead. Speaking of which, the fish guts, which again are our only current resource, are collected via vacuum. In other words, when near enough to the player's boat, resources will be drawn to its position. When collectibles reach the boat, they are added to the player's inventory using those boat struct functions mentioned at the start of the video. Now, the draw code for this project thus far has been kind of fun to mess with. First, all of our objects are invisible on creation. This is so everything can be sorted by draw priority in the HUD object itself for depth purposes. Depth is important because we utilize GameMaker's underwater layer effect to give our water surface some life. However, we needed a way to draw fish either above or below that surface depending on their state. So we have a secondary object that draws the fish under the water surface layer during their default state. And when rumbled, which technically sends them flying into the air, they are drawn to the HUD and prioritized in a way that they appear above most of the other objects, thus giving us a quick and dirty approach to depth without using older, outdated tactics. Speaking of fish states, this is also where the sprite is given an offset to give the illusion of depth. An issue I originally didn't know how to tackle in the first attempt at this project. And honestly, that was the main point behind this first session. Reestablish the original concept's mechanics, only using everything I've learned since then to make things bigger and better than before. Which is the important thing here. Bigger and better. The ambition for this project to go bigger than before and will hopefully provide a better experience for you as the viewer, or should I say player, because this is the first game that I have the intention on releasing as an actual product. Like something that you can eventually purchase kind of product. And I want to document that journey as much as I can through Dev Diary. And even better, that's just the half of it. The best part is that not only can you join me for this journey through my videos, but you don't have to wait until the game is done to play it, because I will be releasing occasional in-development versions as downloadable, playable demos as part of my Patreon perks. The first demo will drop sometime in June, so if you would like to follow the experience on a closer level, as well as play many other games featured here on the channel, and of course get early access to these weekly game dev videos, subscribe to my Patreon. But regardless, I would love to know what you think of the project thus far. Are you excited to see it return? Do the teases of upgrades make things any more intriguing for the future of the project? Leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.